Good evening, YouTube. What's up? It is Brendan Nelson, and I am here to review the recent AAA, maybe even quadruple A release of a video game once again. And this one is Hogwarts Legacy. I bought the game a couple days before launch. I played the early access. I've been playing it pretty consistently over the last couple weeks, and I just now finished the game, just now saw the credits roll. So let's take a little bit of time to talk about it, and I'll give my thoughts, my take, my review, and give my thoughts about the future of this franchise, because very obviously this is going to be a franchise now. I think they've already announced they're going to do a Hogwarts Legacy sequel. The game has sold 12 million copies already. When I read stuff that said they didn't know if they were going to get to 10 throughout the entire duration of the game's release. Like, we are looking at maybe the biggest hit of the year here. I don't know if it's going to outsell Elden Ring, but it's going to be in that conversation. So, Hogwarts Legacy, the game. What do I think of it? After spending about 40 hours with Hogwarts Legacy, it is excellent. It is an excellent game for a first try. And what I mean by that is that I think the game is really good. I had a lot of fun with it. I think that it accomplishes most of what it needed to do. I really enjoyed it, but I think that there was a lot left on the table, and I'm hoping that some of the things that were left on the table were done so because, to a certain extent, this was a proof of concept. To my knowledge, at least not since the old days, like the fifth generation and sixth generation of video games, there had not been a Wizarding World video game to be a smash hit. In fact, I don't know if any of the Harry Potter games since the original one on the PlayStation 1 were any kind of success at all. So I can understand them not wanting to throw themselves into things and do anything too exotic. But I'm hoping that as this franchise continues on, they can do something even better next time, because I do believe that while what they made was really good, it could have been a lot better. So this game, it is basically, thinking about it, now that I think about it, it's the first game set in the Wizarding World that wasn't ripped out of the Harry Potter books. It takes that universe and transforms it into its own thing. It's like Knights of the Old Republic was. Knights of the Old Republic was not based off any Star Wars movie or book. It made its own story using the universe created. That's pretty much what this game does. And it does so quite well. It takes place in the late 1800s. It utilizes its own story with all original characters, although some of them are related to characters that we're familiar with from the books and movies. And they tell a story all their own that really has nothing to do with the story of the Harry Potter, what do they call it? Septology? Yeah, septology, I guess. So I think that the story that it tells is adequate. I think it works perfectly fine. I think that they could have had this exact same story in a game that was, elite, one of the greatest games of all time. And I don't think that the story is the reason why the game was bad. Now, or why the game wasn't as great as it could have been. Now, the only complaint I really have about the story, the main story of the game, is it feels like it ends anticlimactically. It feels like the game just kind of finishes, and you're like, oh, that's it? Not helped by the fact that after you beat the main story, you then have to, unless you've been grinding the whole game, you then have to kind of grind to get to the point where you can actually finish the game. There's the story finish, and then there's the game finish. So it almost kind of feels like, oh, we finished it. Oh, no, you got to do another couple hours, and then you can finish it for real. The credits are rolling now. So, didn't love that, admittedly, but the story's fine. The gameplay. So, the gameplay of this game is basically two different things here. There's the combat, and then there's everything that's not the combat. The combat is a modified version of a From Software game. It's like Dark Souls or Demon Souls or Bloodborne. It's a modified version of that, customized for a Wizarding World game. You use spells, you use magic, you use all these different kinds of spells. Some do damage, some disable, some allow you to exert control over enemies, all these different spells that you learn. And that's kind of in place of like using a sword or an axe or a spear or whatever. You're using spells. But it feels like a modified Dark Souls game. You can do dodge rolls. There's a lot of dodge rolling in this game. There's parrying, there's blocking. It feels like a modified version of a FromSoft game. It's not as good as at least the best FromSoft games. Like this game, the combat in this game, it's not as good as the combat in Bloodborne or Sekiro or Dark Souls 3. It's not as good as those games. Maybe it's as good as like the original Demon Souls because that game is so old, but it's still good. It still works very well. The spell mapping system works fine. The movement works fairly well. The different fights you get into are fun. I think that the general structure of the combat in this game is solid. And outside of combat, the game is basically a BioWare game. That's the best way I can put it. So this game is a fusion of FromSoft combat and BioWare non-combat. You're going around the Hogwarts castle and the surrounding area. You're meeting people. You're having conversations with them. During conversations, you can answer what they say in multiple different ways that help cultivate your personality as a character, whether or not you're a good guy or a bad guy, if you're mean, if you're nice, if you're whatever, you can be whatever you want to be in this game. So that's pretty good. I will say it doesn't have the depth of a BioWare game. It's not as good as KOTOR or Dragon Age or, to a certain extent, I think you could even compare it to games like Fallout and Elder Scrolls. It doesn't have the depth of those games. The things you say in the conversations are interesting, and sometimes they can change things a little bit, but there's no sense of like, I can say one of two things. If I say one thing versus the other thing, the game completely changes. No, it feels more superfluous. Like, it's more just for decoration, so you can feel like you have a lot of control over the story, but in actuality, you don't have that much. So it's not as deep as BioWare, but it's the same kind of thing. And I do think what they do is very good. It's just not as good as what BioWare used to do. And I'm talking about, the old days of BioWare, KOTOR, Dragon Age, the best that BioWare had to offer before things went badly for them. A Mass Effect 2, it basically feels like a combination of those two elements. And while I can say it doesn't do either element as well as the originating elements, it's still overall really good and it works well enough. There's a phenomenal structure here for a game. Running around the castle of Hogwarts was a lot of fun. It's very faithful, very faithful recreation of the Hogwarts from the books and movies. There's a very good recreation of Hogsmeade, excuse me. The surrounding area around Hogwarts is large, and there's a lot to do. You can fly around on a broomstick or a hippogriff, or well, you can't fly, but you can run around on a I can't remember the name of the animal, but there are basically vehicles you can utilize as well. It's a pretty big world, especially given that when this game came out and I learned you were going to be playing it at Hogwarts, I thought, okay, most of the game's probably going to take place in Hogwarts. Not necessarily. There's a lot going on outside of the castle as well, which I like. It's open world, but it's not, it's not true open world. It's a modern open world, which is all you can expect from a modern game. That's the way I would put it. So that's basically the core of the gameplay. It works really well. The structure is phenomenal, and I'm excited to see what they do next. And I think what they did for this first game was plenty good enough. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying, like, maybe next time they'll get it right. No, they got it right enough in this one. There's a lot going on in the school. You can run around the school, and you can see students walking around. You can talk to them. You can see ghosts. You can see decorations. You can collect, you fill out your field guide. That stuff all feels pretty good. There are moments when the game feels a little bit empty, like the open world feels a little bit barren. But for the most part, especially in the castle, when the game was supposed to be filled with things happening, it was. So I would say on that front, the game did everything it was trying to do. Now, the a couple of things that are holding the game back, I think, just to talk about further elements of the gameplay, I'll say this. The side quests in Hogwarts Legacy are not great. They're mostly fetch quests. They're just like, oh, go to this place, get this thing, bring it back to me. It's kind of busy work, which is kind of stock standard for a modern game of really any kind that has side quests. A lot of times they just want to extend the game out. Like every side quest they put in the game is like, oh, we're making the game 20 minutes longer. So just clone a bunch of side quests where like, okay, you go up to this person and they're like, we need 13 wolf ball sacks. And you go collect the wolf ball sacks, you bring it back and you're like, hey, you level up. So it's on that level, the game does not do a great job of making itself more, how should I put this, more robust. It feels more like they're just copying and pasting the same quest over and over and over. It's not bad. Like a lot of games, especially these days, are like that. But if there was a way to make the side quests more engaging, I think that would be nice. Some of it was all right. Like I kind of like the Merlin trials. The Merlin trials were pretty cool. Simple, but pretty cool. Sometimes you would go into a dungeon, and at least then you would actually have things to do. You would have things to fight in order to get the. You would have some things to fight in order to get the whatever side quest thing you're collecting. So, not great, but not terrible either. If they could do something to make the side quests more engaging in the next game, that would be great. There are a lot of side quests you do for students where you help out a fellow Hogwarts student. But the thing is, you do the side quest and then it's just kind of over. You never see that character again. And even if you do, it's not in a substantial way. Now, there were three side quest chains I ran into that were great. There were three students in this game that you actually befriend and you do several quests with. There's a kid in Slytherin who has a sick sister that he's trying to cure. There's a woman in, I think, a girl, because she's a student, in, I think, Gryffindor, who wants to stop poachers. And no, in Hufflepuff, who wants to stop poachers. And I believe there's a girl in Gryffindor who wants to solve some kind of mystery. That's good because it feels like you're getting to know the other students in a more meaningful way. You're actually becoming friends with them. And their side quests do take some interesting twists and turns that I do think add depth to the game. But there's only three of them to my knowledge. I only ever found three of those side quest chains. And I don't think I missed any because I think some of them are, at the very least, getting to know those people are mandatory for the storyline. So I'd be surprised if I missed any. But that was great. I'd like to see maybe they do that with like 10 different students in the next game instead of just three. And that kind of goes into the one thing in this game that I think is like genuinely disappointing, like genuinely a big problem, because there's a good amount of stuff to do in the open world. The open world is sizable enough. The structure of the game is still there. It's not just a complete go do whatever the heck you want to do. Here's the thing. After I beat this game, my game file was 40 hours. So probably around 41 hours spent in this game. Maybe 42 because you got to count like deaths and stuff. But you're probably talking about like a 41 to 42 hour game. I did a lot of side quest stuff. I didn't do all of it. I'm not going to act like I did all of it. But that's because a lot of the side quest stuff just turns into busy work that doesn't mean anything. You can beat the game once you get to level 34. You don't need to do anything more than that. And honestly, most of the stuff you would be doing at that point would be really dull. So we're talking about a 40-hour game here. Now, here's the thing. Maybe this is my problem with the game, not a problem with the game. Like, the game maybe wasn't trying to be this. The game was trying to tell a structured, linear story about a potential goblin rebellion that you're trying to prevent and some stuff that happened in wizarding history. You know, that's fine, but here's the thing. You are a student at Hogwarts for a full year during the events of this game. It goes through a full calendar year of you being a student at Hogwarts, and the game's only 40 hours long. And probably about half that time is spent on main mission quests that have nothing to do with the school. That's a problem to me. I think that there are some classes you go to, like very early in this game, you get to school, you get sorted, immediately you start going to classes. You go to Defense Against the Dark Arts class, Transfiguration class, Charms class, Care of Magical Creatures, Divination. You go to all these classes, and I was thinking to myself, oh, cool, okay, so this is going to be like Persona, where you have the main story stuff going on, but throughout the whole main story, you're going to be going to these classes. Most of the classes you go to once. There are some of them I think you go to twice. Like right at the start of the game, you're like, okay, go to Charm so you can learn this one spell. Go to Defense Against the Dark Arts so you learn this one spell. I was like, okay, this is going to be the structure. And how you do in class informs what your grades are because you are specifically a fifth year student at Hogwarts in this game, not a first year. Part of the reason why is they want you to do more advanced spells. Another reason why they wanted to do that, I thought, was so you could actually have your OWLs be part of the game, but they're not. You take the OWLs at the end of the year in a cutscene, and as far as I can tell, nothing you do as a student or a player throughout the whole game affects your OWLs at all. They're window dressing, they mean nothing. So, what I'm trying to say is if you're going to have the game structure be a kid at school for a year, then why did I only end up going to class like 10 times the whole year? I know you don't want to go to class every day. I know they don't want to do 100 classes. I know that would be boring, but use the classes as like a structure for the calendar of the game. Be like Persona. Honestly, with all the stuff that is in this game, potentially, with all the things you can do with this structure of a boarding school, the game should be 100 hours minimum, I think. And I can understand them not doing that because it's their first try. Maybe they don't want to go balls to the wall. Maybe they want to prove it can work. Maybe they know that selling people on a 100 hour plus game is hard. They want to keep the casual gamer in who just wants to play a 40-hour game and get out. Maybe that's okay. But I was really confused for a lot of this game when I was like, okay, when am I going to go back to class again? When am I going to go learn new spells? Am I going to do like any kind of meaningful exams like Persona? Like really, I maybe this is just me speaking that because I'm a big Persona fan. I think that's the structure this game should have utilized. Like they should have looked at what Persona does and try to emulate that a little bit in Hogwarts. Now, what they did was still good, but at the end of the game, I was just like, okay, I thought my OWLs were going to be part of the game. Not really. Like, in order to activate the end of the year, all I had to do was get to level 34, and it didn't matter how I did it. It had no effect on my grades. I didn't even really get grades. It has no effect to my knowledge on the House Cup. It's just like, okay, you got to get to this XP level to beat the game, and we don't really care how you do it. And, you don't take your exams. You don't get any kind of test results back. You don't get any grades. You don't do any homework assignments. Well, okay, you do a little bit of homework assignments, but it feels like there's a bunch of game here that was untapped. So, to me, they could have done way more stuff with these students. You could have become friends with them. They could have made that system more engaging. They could have made the going to class system more engaging, and it would have been one of the better games I've ever played. As it stands, it is a very good game. I liked it a lot, but I'm hoping that they realize what they're sitting on here with this potential franchise and realize, look, if we're going to have a story involving a kid going to school for a year, let's actually have him go to school for a year, not go to school for like a week and then school gets completely forgotten in exchange for side quests and main story stuff that has nothing to do with the school. Give it the structure. Like I said, this game could easily have been 100 plus hours. Easily been 100 plus hours. And I'm hoping next time they do end up doing something like that. But what they did was really fun. Really good game. Falls shy of greatness, I do think. Mostly because of the things I was just talking about. I think the combat system is good. I think the skeleton that they set up here is great. I really do. But I'm hoping the next Hogwarts Legacy game, whenever they make it, they go all out and give us a full Hogwarts experience.